Really, I just want to go back to bed.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelson, professional horse trainer, and with me, cracking me up, is Deb Romero,
Sorry.
certified Alexander technique instructor. I think we're both having a day where it's like cloudy, overcast
Yep.
in my brain.
Yep.
Um, Chance of showers, but
Chance of
it's
showers with
that's
cloudy clouds and rain. Yeah, about that.
So we're kind of picking an easy topic today, but a very important one called
Mm.
positive reinforcement. And this sort of leads us down a path with many little branches when we talk about positive reinforcement regarding training with any your dog, your cat, your horse, your children. It's all like there's only sort of in our nonverbal communication,
Mm.
right? There's two types of essential training methods. And I think we did a podcast on this a long time ago, but the difference between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And
Mm-hmm.
negative reinforcement sounds bad, sounds negative, right? And it
Mm.
really is just the technical description of giving a correction to behavior, right? So once the behavior has happened, when we give a redirect, that's technically negative reinforcement. So when we give a leg aid, a rein aid, like some horse people say, I never use negative reinforcement. And I go, well, then you would never pull on the halter and lead rope because that's negative reinforcement. You would never use a leg aid, that's negative reinforcement, or a rein aid, that's negative reinforcement. So it's not a bad thing. It just, what it means is the action happened and we're re-guiding. We're guiding a different direction. So that's negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is technically the behavior or whatever the horse chose to do was an internal choice made by the horse without our guidance. It was a spontaneous something, something that we like.
Right.
And then we give a reward to that. So that's what positive reinforcement means is we're sort of waiting for the happy accident to occur and then we're
Okay.
reinforcing it. Does
Right.
that
Instead of, yeah, because this is such a fine line. Because to me, it's like the difference between the predator and the prey animal. Because what the predator might consider a reward may not be a reward to the prey animal.
bingo? So
Yeah, and I'm so confused with that because it's happened. We talked before the podcast about I see even a horse that goes into that positive thing all by itself. And then the human gets all excited and, oh, good boy, good boy, good boy. And then the horse's head goes up and the horse goes, what, what? And
yeah.
they give a treat. I'm questioning that now. I'm
Well, and
questioning that state of excitement. Is that, what
is
does
that
that do?
a positive reward? Is that
Yeah,
positive reinforcement? Yeah,
yeah,
it's a great question because what would be positive reinforcement for you, even though as a predator species, we're all human. So there's a lot of what
right,
we consider positive reinforcement that we all kind of have in common. But then there's the uniqueness of the individual,
right.
right? So if somebody gives me a birthday gift of going on a roller coaster, I'm like, that's a positive reinforcement to
For
me. I
you.
love that,
I would
right?
die.
Yeah, that's not positive
That's
reinforcement for you.
not that is not my cup of tea at all.
Right. So if I did a really good job and I got a ticket to this great roller coaster ride, that
Mm,
would be positive reinforcement to me. But if you did a good job, say you worked in an office and your reward was this same roller coaster ride, you're like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. That really doesn't work for me.
right. Yeah, so I'm curious about this question of what state are we in as the leader, predator, whatever, rider, owner, when we give a treat? Are we going into an excitatory phase? And I see these horses get very nippy and searching for treats in that excited phase. And I'm wondering about
Hmm.
that.
No, that's a really good way to develop food neurosis
Oh, is that what that
because,
is?
yeah.
Okay. Now
I
I
had
have a
one of
name for
those.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, because that excitement energy, right? Like even with Caesar Milan when he talks about dog training, and it's sort of beyond obedience training. You're working with energy, you're working with horses, you're working with energy and space and nonverbal communication. So energy, space, body language. So what feels positive? What is the number one important thing? Well, to all prey and predator species, but even more so with prey species, right? They want to feel safe.
They want it. Yeah. And
They
I,
want to feel
so,
safe. And so excitement energy, what we consider fun, can also be, can sort of borderline on, am I safe? Right? It can,
oh, that's a good point.
because when we really feel safe, it's the rest and digest nervous system. So it's a resting energy, like calmness, right?
Yeah.
Soft cooperation, softness, and physical touch. If we look at predator species, right? Even kittens and puppies, what do they do to feel safe? They pile up, they
Mm-hmm.
touch each other, right? They snuggle. And what do foals do in order to feel safe? They go to their mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're near the mother, but they're not necessarily cuddling the way predator
Right.
species do. They share space, right?
Right.
So when we take our little, monkey paws and arms and try to wrap ourselves around a horse to show affection, that can be, from the horse's perspective, something that is like a predator attacking them rather than a hug
Wow.
or a pile of kittens, right? So we're sort of thinking that's what makes us feel good is that physical hug,
Exactly.
touch, and all of that. Where for horses, right, they play, they share space, they graze nose to nose, they kind of groom each other, but they don't really hug, sort of. I mean, I've had horse hugs where they wrap their neck around you and it's very sweet, but
Yes.
it's not the same sort of physical, clingy kind of reinforcement, right? And so a lot of times when we're thinking we're rewarding our horse, we're sort of trying to bring up excitement energy or have this
Mm.
physical closeness that isn't, it's sort of like the roller coaster ticket for you. It's not exactly a reward. It's not exactly positive from their perspective.
And I remember way back when, was it the Umwelt podcast we did that we're so verbal and that's just not something the horse goes, they're not, if we're saying, "Oh, good boy," in that very high pitched, excited voice, that to them, I think would put them into sympathetic mode.
It can put them on alert
Yeah.
because when horses get excited like that, it's not really as much playtime or bonding time as it is everybody go on alert. It's potential danger
Okay.
time, right? So, yes, horses play and get excited and have a hoo-ha, but it's like, it's not necessarily a reward. It's kind of an expression of pent-up energy or danger, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of a release of pressure or it's an alert to danger. So when we bring excitement energy, and the voice is sort of just like the icing on the cake. It's more
Uh,
the energy we bring up in our body, excitement, 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 which means either we have all this pent up energy we need to release, which is not positive necessarily,
True.
right? Or we're saying, hey, there might be an alert to danger. That's what we're conveying with our energy, right? And even Cesar Millan talked about that with dogs, that when you're giving food, because food is a big reward for predators, right?
Right.
So when we're giving food as positive reinforcement, if we're sort of going, here's this overexcited dog, and we're going, good
Hmm.
boy, good boy, good boy, adding excitement energy to an already excited dog, that dog can become more and more and more kind of out of control with excitement energy, never being able to bring it down.
To come back, that coming back down to the parasympathetic. Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Right. So when we give positive reinforcement through treats, especially, what the treat is doing is reinforcing the emotional state and the thought right now, right? So
Yeah,
if we give it in a way that we add excitement and then give a treat, we're rewarding excitement energy. Or if,
that's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
yeah, and so then what happens is every time there's a treat, it starts to create a conditioned response in the horse of excitement.
Yep.
And that's why I call it like a food neurosis or treat neurosis, is
Yeah.
because as soon as you give a treat, even if the horse was in a calm state, and this can lead right down the path to food aggression, right?
I know I've
Because,
seen that too. I've seen that happen also.
yeah, because when we're adding either harsh energy or excitement energy, and the excitement energy, we think we're being positive and doing a good thing,
Right.
but we're not looking at it from our horse's perspective,
Yeah.
right? That's like me giving you the roller coaster ticket for your birthday. Thanks.
And you
Thanks.
get all
Thanks a
excited,
bunch.
and I'm like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, and if I gave you a present every day, right? And I gave you a present that created anxiety
Hmm.
in you, thinking I was doing a nice thing for you, not realizing I was creating anxiety because you go, now you're in this position where, oh, I like getting the present, but it's creating a little bit of anxiety for me.
Hmm.
And I give you another one and another one that keeps creating more anxiety. And I'm excited, right? And so I think
Right.
it's a good thing. But every time I hand you some new envelope, it triggers excitement or anxiety in you because I've reinforced that over and over and over.
God, that
And
makes so much sense.
yeah, and you're going, what now? No, please don't give me any more presents, right?
Or I can think about way back when my dad used to travel a lot, and he went to Hawaii once or twice a year to work. And I always had this expectation of getting a lei every time he came back. And I thought
Mm.
more about that than spending time with my dad, which that it kind of evolved around that. And it's the wrong reason. Does that make sense? It's the wrong reason to be sharing at that time.
Well, and I think what you're describing really well is that sometimes treats, gifts, presents, whatever you want to call it, can almost become a distraction from
That's
the
it.
from
It
the
doesn't,
relationship. That's what you're
yeah,
saying.
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because it seems like I see in some of these horses and the horse rider combination, it's like a double-edged sword, you know?
Hmm.
I can see real edginess. The the owner rider wants something, and as soon as it's achieved, it's in an excitatory phase. It's not in a calm
Yeah.
phase.
And it's always with the best of intentions.
Oh yeah.
But like I have this great story, this one client who was very big on treats and kept little slices of carrots in like a pouch that she wore, right?
Right.
And with the idea of giving positive reinforcement instead of negative, which is a nice thought for us as humans. It's a better
Hmm.
approach to training than the stick method, right?
Right.
And and with the idea in her mind to reward the slightest try, which is also a very good thought, very positive impact
Hmm.
in our horse industry. And inadvertently, because if we're not really working dynamically with the individualness of our horse, this is kind of an extreme example of what could happen. So she was rewarding her horse for the slightest try with a little slice of carrot throughout her training session. And what it turned into was like putting a quarter in her horse to get another 15 minutes of work, right? Hang on.
That's funny. Yeah, I can see that. It's like I said, it was like with my dad, it changes what the relationship is about. I guess that's what I'm seeing. It
Yeah,
really changes the
it became,
relationship between you and, if you're always expecting a reward every 5 minutes, you're not in the work. You know what I mean? You're just thinking about the treat, reward, or whatever.
and that's exactly where this horse's mind went was, every 15 minutes in a 1 hour training session, the horse shut down, refused to cooperate until he got
Ah,
the next carrot slice. And so
so
then it kind
that
of
is
perpetuated from there, where it became really a negative cycle that
right.
overrode the relationship. And it started with the best of intentions,
Hmm.
but that habitual, when we make it sort of expected and habitual, it can have a way, like you described, of overriding an
Yeah,
actual conversation. You
yeah.
know, it becomes bigger than the relationship. Like I'm not working anymore until I get my paycheck. I want my carrot slice, put another quarter in, or I'm not cooperating.
Yeah, that I think that's what's happening. Exactly.
And that's why so many people are like black and white about food and treats with especially with horses. They're either never give your horse treats, especially by hand,
Right.
or I use treats all the time and it's part of my relationship with my horse. And I'm kind of in the middle. I go,
I am
I
too, I think.
I
That
always
I'm
have
more
treats.
concerned about that excitatory phase that the human goes into and what that does to the horse.
Yeah.
If
So like for example, when I'm having to go in and out of my tack room at my barn and I just walk the horse in, I haven't tied them in the wash rack or anything. Because I'm very forgetful. It's like I always forget something in the tack room, right? So part of what I did was sort of trained my horses to wait patiently, not tied, in the barn aisle outside the tack room because I constantly forget things or I want to put something away quickly before I put the horse back. And so I keep treats inside the door. And if I open
mm,
the door and go in, when I come out, there's a treat in my hand. So they've all learned to wait. But if they get impatient, demanding, excited, then when I come through the door, I have to wait until they're calm and then give the treat.
I think that's the key is I think all riders or horse handlers need to have the Alexander technique. They need to learn to pause and inhibit their own expression at that moment and
Yeah,
check in with the
because
horse and go, how would the horse like to be it, keep them in that calm state? You can still reward them in that calm state.
that is the one you want to reward,
Yeah, you want
right?
them in
So
that state.
it's not about giving treats or not giving treats. It's not about positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement.
Right.
Because when we tend to give positive reinforcement, we tend to get excitement energy, right? And when we
Mm.
give, excuse me, the pollen has been crazy. When we give negative reinforcement, we tend to add a little grr, a
Yeah.
little
It's a
energy,
fine-edged
right?
sword when you're really tapping into your, what's going on with you? Are you reacting to the situation,
Right.
or are you taking
Leading.
yeah, are you being the leader or just reacting to your situation?
Right.
Big thing for horses, I think.
It's a huge thing for horses
Yeah.
because we are always broadcasting our energy.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's super subtle and we can hide it, but
No.
it is loud and clear to every horse. It is the language they speak, right? So if we're kind of increasing our energy level, whether it's excitement, whether it's anxiety, whether it's a little bit of tension with some grrr behind it, it's like all of that escalation of energy
Mm-hmm.
is more related to the sympathetic nervous system than it is the parasympathetic nervous system. And not that we want our horses to be deadheads. Like you
Right.
can be calm and focused at very high speeds doing exciting work, but it's that sort of like the escalation of away from calmness is where we don't have that clarity of thought. We're more in a
Mm.
reaction mode than we are
Right.
a proactive mode,
Yeah.
right?
So I think maybe the humans even drifted into sympathetic reactory mode, and we're not realizing it. We're not realizing we're going there.
Yeah, because what I see all the time, and one of the cycles, if I go in with a new client to start rehab, whether it's, well, usually if it's behavioral, I'll walk into a scenario where the horse gets anxious, the human gets anxious, the horse gets more
Mm,
anxious, the human gets more anxious, and they just ping pong back and forth.
yes.
Or the
Yes.
same thing on the flip side, the horse gets snarky and aggressive, and the human reacts with aggression, and that ping pong game starts, right? And it's just a losing battle. So, whether we're using
Right.
positive or negative reinforcement, the first thing is, can we get control over our own energetic state, which is really pretty related to our emotional state,
True.
right? So to have calm energy doesn't mean we're feeling joy and peace and happiness.
Right.
Sometimes it just means we have enough self-control to take a pause and go, what's going on here?
Yeah. It's that I don't know detachment from the situation that's going on, and having the capability of checking in
Right.
to say what's going on with me. I know sometimes it seems like it might be a little bit hard in that situation, and maybe, we always say in the Alexander community, you have a choice. You can walk away.
Or you can
If you
just
can't,
you can stop in your tracks.
yeah,
I
just
go, just
that
stop.
pause,
Hmm.
that pause and say, wait a minute, unless you're in physical danger, but well, wait a minute, what's the horse thinking at this point? What's going on with them and not me, as in the sense of reactory phase.
I think even more importantly, I would switch that around because we don't always know what's going on with the horse. And
Ah,
to have a relationship with a horse, we have to learn quite a bit to see through their eyes. But we
mm-hmm.
do know how we feel. And so I use something called like the butterfly barometer, right? I go, that feeling of butterflies in your stomach,
Oh, yeah.
right? We use that term a lot, butterflies in your stomach.
Wow.
And that can be fear or excitement. It
Yeah,
can be
true.
positive or negative that we have these butterflies in our stomach, right? And so I go, how many are there? How crazy are they? Right? And I go, would you say there's if 10 is a lot and very active and 0 or 1 is just a butterfly resting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then where are you on that sort of butterfly barometer? Because that broadcast of energy that we project can also be misunderstood by our horse.
Yeah, that's key. Our what, like you said, the roller coaster gift idea of maybe that's not what is needed at that time, even though we might think it's the right thing. I don't know.
Right. So somebody watching you and I both on a roller coaster
Hmm.
would see that we both have high energy,
Right.
right? But it might be hard to figure out, other than body language or expression, that humans understand, but we don't always understand horse body language and expression, right? That's
Hmm.
something we learn. But it might be hard to tell the difference that I'm thrilled and excited and you're terrorized, right?
Exactly.
I go because the energy is up. It doesn't
Right.
matter that I love it and I'm having a great time and you hate it and you're like, this is torture.
Yeah,
That energy
exactly.
level is going to be, that would be 10 butterflies,
Hmm.
right? Where if I'm just hanging out with my horse is cooperating, I'm down to one butterfly if we both feel safe and we both like what we're doing. So if we sort of check in with ourselves, and even because sometimes internal feelings and emotions are very hard to verbalize or even put your finger on.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
for a lot of people, because we live so much in our heads, that
Yeah, I see that
disconnect,
a lot, the disconnect. Yeah.
that sometimes we don't even know what we're feeling or we're not paying
Hmm.
attention to the energy, type of energy that we're broadcasting. So when we take a pause, I think what we're trying to do is go, where am I between one butterfly and 10? Like that's
Hmm.
sort of just a general sensation that we can relate to pretty easily, right? And if we're kind of up at 5 to 10 butterflies, that's sort of what we're conditioning in our horse, right? So a lot of people expect the horse to fill in for them. Like I'm an anxious, fearful rider, so I need a deadhead, super calm horse.
Wow. Never thought of that. Yeah.
But what happens dynamically is if you bought that super calm, laid back,
Hmm.
deadhead horse, but you continue to be a fearful, anxious person, that energy will begin to condition that horse
Right.
to match you, right? So we kind of have to meet in the middle, whether the horse is anxious or we're anxious, or we're angry or the horse is angry. That's where we go, okay, somebody has to get this ball rolling in a new direction.
Right.
Somebody has to bring this energy level down by a few butterflies,
Yeah.
right? And we can't make our horse do that. For all the training tools and leverage and techniques and strategies that have been around for hundreds of years with horses, we can't make them calm. That has to
Right.
happen from inside of them,
Inside out. Hmm.
right? What we can do is quit feeding, right?
Right.
Quit adding fuel or feeding the aggression or the anxiety, the fear, the excitement by not contributing our own energy to it,
Right.
right? That is what we can control.
Yeah.
And
And some
that's,
people don't even know that they're doing that,
oh,
that
yeah.
they're in that excitatory state and energetically. And like I said, it's hard to recognize. I mean, I kind of do just when I put my hands on people, I can tell what
The state of the energy.
the state of the energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we're not learning how to tune into ourselves, I don't know if we would recognize it in ourselves.
Yeah, because we rely very much on thoughts,
Hmm.
right? And horses are listening more to our energy. No matter what we're thinking, that's going to affect our emotional state. And the
Hmm.
thought emotion combination is the energy generator. That's what sort of determines the very individual energy. And I teach it a lot, like, especially if I'm arriving at a scenario where the owner is now becoming fearful of this horse because of behavior and
Hmm.
the whole situation is sort of spiraling the wrong direction. The very first thing is when you're working with horses, because this is their language, and really it's all animals, right? They're not going to speak English or French or German
Right,
or Japanese. They're reading the energy,
right.
right? And when we can bring ourselves into a state of calmness, that helps those around us feel safer. And even
Yes.
human to human, but it's particularly important with animals. And so the horses, like we talked about reviewing that Umwelt research paper,
Hmm.
their number one sense of how they see the world. So I said see because that's our number one sense is
That's our
visual.
that see visual and voice is definitely the human first response.
Yes, auditory and visual are our
Hmm.
strongest senses. But for the horse, it's the sense of touch, which also means that ability, that level of sensitivity to feel our energy, right? Our personal space, our energetic field from a great distance. And that's what keeps them alive in the wild is that
Hmm.
sensitivity, right? So we can look at National Geographic shows and watch the zebras hanging out with lions until the lion's energy changes. And then the zebras are out of there, right? But they're,
Or I was riding yesterday and I was riding in the pasture and my herd mare was about 20 feet away and the horse I was on wanted to go past her. And all the herd mare did was turn her head towards us with her ears pinned back. And the horse I was on was like, "Oh, hell no."
the lead
And I
mare, you
went,
mean, yeah.
"I'm going to respect that. I am not going to try to force
No, so
anything.
like from
Just get out of Dodge."
20 feet away, that horse was like, avoid that humongous bubble, make a left
Yeah, and
turn.
they're
Yeah.
so good at that. But and some horses' bubbles are huge and some are they're all different sizes.
Yeah. So that bubble we talk about in human terms, it's about maybe 3 to 4 feet around our body. That's kind of our, like before physical touch, we start to sense things, 4 to 6
Right,
feet, right? For horses, it could be 15, 20, 50 feet, depending on that sensitivity. But that's part of how they perceive the world most accurately is through that sense of touch, which also means a layer of sensitivity to energy that we have a hard time understanding.
right,
And so when we give positive reinforcement, sometimes the most positive thing we can give the horse is to respect the space, keep the distance, and do nothing, sit there and be calm.
yeah.
I go, that is positive reinforcement from the horse's perspective.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I call that just each other being in our own spaces and being calm and working on ourselves, just
Yeah, or
yeah,
even if we can get ourselves from anxiety to calmness, or we came to the barn with a little bit of road rage, right? A little bit of
right,
frustration from work. Can we bring that tension level back to calmness? And just that change in our own energy is actually positive reinforcement to our horse.
right.
It also tells our horse that I can control my energy and you could too, right?
That
So
I think
instead
is
of
the bigness of it all. That's huge because they need to know that. Because if we're not in control of our own self, they're not going to trust us.
yeah, it's like a herd with no leader. It's
Right,
it's sort of like, well, the response can be different. Some herds that don't have a well-defined, stable, emotionally calm horse, that's the most trusted member of any herd is not the crazy one. It's not the mean one, right? It's the
right,
one that creates a sense of safety for the rest of the herd. Now, that might mean they push other herd members around a bit, or they get to the water trough first and chase the others away, whatever that means. But that horse is typically not the drama queen of the pasture,
Right.
right? So the drama queen of the pasture gets the whole herd stirred up, but that isn't the one that's going to lead the herd to safety. It's only alerting the herd to danger. And
Hmm.
that's when we're sort of going, what a good boy, mooch, 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 pat, 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 pat. Oh, that was so good. All that excitement energy is like riling up the herd again, right? Where if we just
Like
sort
what?
of,
What?
what's going on? What's going on? Where if we just sort of calmly, right, our horse just achieved something, spontaneously chose something we really liked, right? If we just go in and
Hmm.
say, hey, thanks for that, here you go, and give a treat, we're not escalating the energy away from calmness, and the treat definitely then becomes positive reinforcement.
In a healthy state,
Mm.
in a healthy energetic state.
Well,
Yeah.
because the positive reinforcement is only going to reinforce whatever the current energy is and the current thought. So if we give the positive reinforcement with excitement energy, the horse reacts with excitement, we give the treat, and now we're reinforcing excitement,
Yeah.
right? Or if our horse is nasty to us and we give a treat, sometimes we're reinforcing that nastiness to us, thinking that we're bribing them into liking us,
Wow.
right? Because for
Yeah.
humans, cuddling, food, and not working are some of our biggest positive reinforcements,
Right.
right? Those are not necessarily positive to our horse,
Exactly.
right? So positive reinforcement for our horse can include food, but if you've ever had to trailer load a horse that's terrified of trailers, the food doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, my big mare, not food driven at all.
Not only not food driven, but any horse that's authentically in a state of fear, the food won't work
The food
because
doesn't matter.
food is lower on the hierarchy than safety.
Yeah.
They would rather feel safe than eat,
Yeah.
right? So if they don't feel safe, you can offer them the tastiest treat on the planet and they won't take it, right?
Yeah.
So if they feel safe, then the food or the treats work very well because it just gives a little extra motivation. But if they're genuinely in a state of fear, and if they do take the treat in a state of fear, you're reinforcing fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of horses won't take a treat, won't take food if they're really in a state of fear, right? But even if it's a low grade fear where it's just tension or anxiety, fight or flight, and we're giving treats or we're trying to calm them down, right? By placating or giving food or giving treats because that's maybe what would make us feel better. We're actually reinforcing the wrong energy, the wrong state of mind, or fear itself, which will
And
then build over time.
I've always wondered about this because I like to watch cop shows, and I always love it when here's this person in this highly excited state, and the police officer's going, "Just calm down." And I'm
Right.
like, "Does that really work?"
If the police officer can hold calmness themselves, it
Yeah,
does work, right?
but but it's you can't just tell somebody else to calm down. It
No,
has to be an organic, genuine thing within them that they can find.
you can hold the space, you
You
can
can hold the
set
space.
boundaries. You
Yeah,
could, like the police officer as an example, he could remain calm when everybody else is losing it. That's one of the
yeah,
skills of the job, right?
right.
Is to remain calm enough that you can think rather than react.
I
And
think
that's a
I
very important quality
that
for
is
that
very
job,
important of not to be in reactory state
right?
when you're
Not to
working with
match,
horses. Yeah,
not to add to the emotional state that's already going on, They can't
Right.
make the person calm down anymore by saying it, or even if they handed them a burrito, it's like that's not going to calm them down, right? It has to happen from the inside of the individual, just like our
Yeah.
horse. But they
Yeah.
can hold the space, or the policemen have a lot of tools to say, don't do that, right?
True.
So that's where we use negative reinforcement to say, you can't come over the top of me to my horse, right? You can't run away from me to my horse. You can't bite me. You can't kick me. Like those are the boundaries
Right. The
within,
basic rules,
right?
rules of engagement.
Right. But positive reinforcement might not work yet.
Yet. I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
Yet.
And there are places, like if we're working at Liberty with a horse, to me, Liberty is almost all positive reinforcement because I'm leaving a huge amount of choice up to the horse. I'm
Hmm.
in a safely enclosed environment. If I'm safe and the horse isn't attacking me, then I go, there's nothing you can do wrong. Do what you do. And if you happen to do something that I really appreciate and want to reinforce, I can use positive reinforcement in that case, right? I can do nothing.
And it could
I
be,
could
it
give a
could,
treat.
yeah, it could do nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people live in such a reactory, overstimulated state that they don't realize that just being quiet is a reward.
Yeah. No, and it's funny, like your cop show story. I was at this barn one time and this horse was doing groundwork, pulled the lunge line out of the lady's hands, and goes tearing back towards its stall in the barn with the lunge line dragging high speed. And this woman who was kind of standing off to the side of the path of this horse, as the horse comes tearing by, super high energy, she's going brr, 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 which is like the cue in especially with dressage for a horse to slow down. And I'm just standing there going, I don't think that's gonna work.
I don't
Yeah.
think we're at a state that we're listening to that.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work right this moment. And so basically a horse in that state, it's like what's done is done,
Mhm.
right? Cross your fingers that the horse doesn't get hurt until the
Yeah.
horse finds halt, but then going and punishing that horse or running
Mm.
after that horse, right? You learn very quickly as a horse person that if your horse is loose, you don't go running excited at them, right? You just don't.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Because if you do, you're not catching them for a
Screaming at
while.
them. Come back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
I know. No, and I hear people do that with dogs. It doesn't seem to work any better. I
I
don't know
agree with
about
that.
training dogs, but the yelling doesn't seem to
I don't
really
think
do the
so.
trick.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And at least the lady who was going brr, 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 like I go, at least she was staying calm. Like that was
I
good.
was thinking maybe it was helping her stay calm. I don't know.
Maybe because she felt like she was doing something, but it was
Yeah.
one of those comical situations where you're like, good luck with that. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah. Nice try though. Because we can't control how another sentient being, right? Horses have
Hmm.
thoughts and feelings. So
Hmm.
we can't control those thoughts and feelings. We can lend a hand, we can give guidance, we can set boundaries, but we kind of have to wait for that butterfly barometer to come down
Hmm.
internally, right? And that's where positive reinforcement becomes really powerful, right? So when our horse is calm and sort of chooses to do something because they thought it through,
Yeah,
because
you
or it
can
was a
see. Hmm.
total happy accident. I go then giving like food or a gentle pet or something kind. It's like that positive, or just leaving them alone and not
Yeah,
correcting the
I like to
mistake.
just personally, I like to just be left alone. That's a great positive reinforcement for me.
Absolutely. Like if you happen to be an introverted person,
Hmm.
I go, having more people around with a lot of excitement is not a positive reinforcement.
Nope.
The quiet time is the positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
That's what recharges your batteries,
exactly.
right? So whether we're dealing with people or dogs, but especially with our horses, we have to learn to be sensitive to their energy, their body language, what they're telling us through their behavior, right? Instead of saying that behavior is good or bad, my horse is obedient or
Exactly.
disobedient, they're expressing what they think and feel through behavior. And so we're either sort of reinforcing that or we're trying to channel it or guide it a little different direction that's more useful for both of us,
Yes.
right? So kind of reading our horse and just like, here we are, two humans, but positive reinforcement means something different to you than it means to me.
Right.
And that's how individual horses are too.
Yeah.
And we think there's one way, right? I use a clicker. I use treats. I don't use treats. I quit
Hmm.
working as soon as my horse gives me a try. Like all of those become rules in our minds of how to give positive reinforcement. And I go, there are no rules. The horse doesn't have any rules. It's sort of what works for the horse.
Right. And each horse is different. I mean, even the ones I have here are different.
Oh, yeah.
One likes to have its face touched, one doesn't.
Exactly.
I mean, it's that basic.
No, and a lot of horses love to be groomed, and a lot of horses don't.
Exactly.
They don't like being groomed. They don't like being touched. They have these big, like where they feel
Big
more
bubble.
most
Hmm.
comfortable is if that human or other horse is at least 10 feet away.
Yeah.
That's their positive reinforcement,
Hmm.
right? So, okay, we got to groom them, but we got to figure out a way or maybe take breaks that we're not torturing, right? Just because we think grooming theoretically is always a good thing, it's not. I see lots of horses that hate
That
being
don't
groomed.
like it. Hmm.
Yeah. So we can't just assume what we think of as positive reinforcement has that same meaning
To them.
to our horse. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think it's a super good point you brought up that almost too many gifts
Yeah.
override the dynamic relationship. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of that. It's such an
It popped
important
into my
point.
head about my dad.
Yeah.
My dad must be talking to me. I don't know.
Yeah. And that when we're like a Pez dispenser, with the treats, or we have to put a carrot slice in like a quarter to get any more work out
Yeah.
of our horse, I go, okay, that's going a bit far. Like now we
Yeah.
don't have a relationship anymore. We
I think
don't
that's the
have
big
one.
thing I see. The relationship changes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's
It's
all
really
about,
dynamic.
it's very dynamic. And we can override that, like you said, by and even if it's not food, I go even with like clicker training or something
Or
like that, like
anything. Yeah.
anything that's become associated as a positive reinforcement, I think it's a great point that when we overuse it and
Hmm.
we're not relying on the more dynamic pieces of body language, energy, reading behavior to go, what is my horse trying to tell me?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
That then we just disconnect from the horse.
It's a disconnect. Yep.
It's a disconnect, right? And our horse being obedient to me is very different than having a relationship with a horse.
True.
I go, obedience to me is only important for the sake of safety, for my
Yeah.
horse as well as for myself. I go, though, that's where I'm going to set some parameters. But otherwise, I go, you get to say what you want, even if I find it a little insulting right now.
Yeah. It's the real world.
Yeah, yes. All right, so let's wrap it up. I think we got that topic sort of covered. Anything else you want
Yes.
to add?
Nope. I'm glad we talked about it because I see it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that because of the term negative reinforcement,
Mm-hmm.
what instantly sort of springs to mind for most people is harsh with the spurs, harsh with the whip, bullying the horse, using a lot of leverage, being inappropriate with your corrections. That's how people think of negative reinforcement. But that really isn't what it is. It just means we're setting a boundary or we're correcting something that already happened. We're
Mm-hmm.
saying, don't do that. And the positive reinforcement is saying, yes, do that. And if we think of it in terms of just a simple yes or no, a negative
Right.
reinforcement is a no and a positive reinforcement is a yes. But then we have to look at what are we saying yes to?
I know. That's the thing. What are we saying yes to? Yeah.
And what are we saying no to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because that's the part that is dynamic, that we can't control how our horse feels and thinks, but we can say yes or no. Thank you very much.
Mm.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast. Welcome to all the new subscribers on YouTube, and we hope you're enjoying these podcast episodes. Please comment, especially if there's a topic you would like to have discussed or fleshed out a little bit. We're always happy to do that.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. We'll
Bye.
see you next time. Bye.